The NJ Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders, its directors and employees assume no responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, objectivity, or usefulness of the information presented on our site. We do not endorse any recommendations or opinion made by any member or physician, nor do we advocate any treatment. You are responsible for your own medical decisions. Now I'm going to turn over the introductions of our speaker to Martha Butterfield, the webinar coordinator of NJCTS. Marty?
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Our speaker for tonight is Dr. Stephen Tobias. This is his second appearance in our Wednesday webinar lineup. His previous presentation on a systematic approach to parenting was in March 2013 and is available for download on our website. After graduating from Hobart College in upstate New York, Dr. Tobias completed his graduate work in New Jersey, receiving his master's in psychology from Kane College and his doctorate in school psychology from Rutgers University Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology. Dr. Tobias has worked for many years at Morristown Memorial Hospital conducting evaluations, parent training workshops, and family therapy. He is currently the director of the Center for Child and Family Development in Morristown, New Jersey, which is a multidisciplinary evaluation and treatment center. In addition to his work there, Dr. Tobias consults at a number of private schools. He has co-authored several books, including Emotionally Intelligent Parenting and Social Problem Solving, Interventions in the Schools. His areas of expertise include attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorders, and family therapy. Dr. Tobias, welcome. We're delighted to have you back. And now, without further introduction, I'll turn tonight's presentation over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, and I appreciate you inviting me to talk this evening, because I think this is an important topic in terms of how to raise emotionally intelligent teenagers. What I'm going to talk about tonight characterizes most teens. I'm not going to specifically address teens with Tourette syndrome or other disorders. Really, the only difference, I think, for teens with any kind of challenge is that they're more challenging to work with. I think that, it's even more difficult the more difficulties the kid has. So you have to parent them and work with them in a much more careful and deliberate manner than you would, perhaps other kids. Because teens really are different animals. You can't use the same kinds of strategies that you have in the past. The same, forms of punishment don't work. The same kinds of reasoning doesn't work. You really need to have a different relationship with them, and really, it's all about the relationship. And so that's actually one of the subtexts here is really how to have that relationship, how to maintain a relationship with the child. And I think that's true whether you're a parent or an educator, that you have to have a relationship with the kid, in order to work with them. So first I want to talk about why it's so difficult to parent teenagers. The first thing to realize is that the teen brain is characterized by intense emotions rather than thoughtful judgment. They use the emotional parts of their brain much more than the rational parts of their brain. And this is just part of, normal neurological development. Now, you don't have to worry that the rational, self-control, organized part of the brain that's located in the prefrontal cortex, this does eventually catch up, usually sometimes in their 20s. This also, by the way, happens sooner for girls than for boys. I read research someplace that said that girls mature at age 21 and boys neurologically mature at age 30, which is why I prevented my two girls from dating anybody under 30, but they're in their 20s now, so it's okay. All right. Now, but because the emotional part of their brain is growing faster, excuse me, than their rational part of the brain, this places them really more at risk because they tend to make more emotional decisions and don't always anticipate the consequences of their actions. And obviously, when you're making emotional decisions, when you're just reacting to your emotions, this can really make smart kids sometimes do dumb things. I think this is really what my whole practice is based on. The fact that I have, smart kids, good kids, well-adjusted kids who are doing what they feel like doing, responding emotionally to situations, really, rather than taking a step back, thinking about what they're doing, thinking about consequences, and obviously then behaving irrationally and to their detriment at times. Now, there isn't a lot you could do, in terms of direct neurological development. I think, really what we have to do is make sure that we're keeping our teens safe, help them develop both skills and values, and then also wait for their judgment to develop. Now, one thing that I would say, though, about the teens' brains being characterized by intense emotions is that sleep deprivation makes this worse. And I think this generation of teens is really being sleep deprived. I'm very worried about this, that kids aren't getting enough sleep. Because when kids don't get enough sleep, it makes it harder for them to learn, harder for them to control their emotional reactions to things. It really even causes their immune system to be compromised. In extreme cases, it can even cause depression in kids as well. Teens' biological clock is set later than adults. In other words, teens really are made to go to bed late and wake up late. And I think the fact that a lot of high schools start at 7:30, is just cruel. So the fact that, it's hard for kids to, get up and go to school, to some degree really isn't their fault. Although it is their responsibility. When I'm working with teens, I certainly always make a distinction to them between something that's their fault and something that's still their responsibility to do. So I'm very empathetic with teens as to why it is so hard to get to bed, why they can't wake up in the morning, but again, they still have to do it. Now, the second thing that makes it difficult to parent teens is that teens need to separate from their parents to establish their own separate identity. They really need to push the parents away to develop a separate sense of self. Now, at the same time, as they're not really always ready to deal with that independence in a responsible manner, again, because of, the development of their emotional brain, over their, the rational, organized part of their brain. So this sets up a normal conflict between the teen's need for independence and also the parents' need to keep the teen safe and to continue to provide guidance for them. So I think it's important that parents don't take it personally when teens, reject you, criticize you, and ignore you. The challenge really is to maintain this connection with them while respecting their need for freedom. In general, when it comes to parenting teens, I always quote Ronald Reagan, who said about the Russians, trust but verify. Okay, so I think that we want to trust our teens, we want to give them, a certain degree of freedom, but we also have to verify that they are behaving in a responsible manner and certainly making good decisions for themselves. Now, unfortunately, we all live busy lives, and there's really less time that families are together. One study I read said that parents spend on average 46 minutes a day interacting with their children. And I think probably this is even, it's even less for teens because teens are even busier than younger kids. So for a parent to maintain contact and influence, you really have to spend time with your teenager. And also, by the way, nagging your teen to do something doesn't count as, kind of like time. It doesn't count as quality time between you and your teen. One of the things I think that's also kind of interesting about teens and the need to separate from their parents is that teens lie because they want to do what they want to do. We all want to do what we want to do, but teens especially. They lie because, they want independence, they want to do the things that they want to do, but interestingly, they also don't want to disappoint their parents. So they really do care what parents think, but I think they're also compelled to rebel at the same time. A lot of parents, I think, get very frustrated because the teens sometimes behave much more appropriately outside the home than they do inside the home with their own families. one of the things that I do is I reassure parents that this is actually because the parent has taught the kid very good values and knows right from wrong, and often knows what to do and knows how to treat others. But the reason that they aren't extending the same kind of courtesy to their own parents is really, as I said, because of their emotional reactions and their need to separate from the parents. But because they're separating from the parents, reacting emotionally to the parents, they do look to others outside the home for role models and mentors. And this, I think, is really where the role of educators and others in the child's life, other adults in the teen's life, become very important. So teachers, coaches, even parents of the teen's friends are very important to the teen, and they're much more likely to listen to them, ironically, than they are to their own parents. I remember I was once working with a family, and I was talking to a teenager with the parents there, and as I'm talking, the teenager's, like nodding his head in agreement, really sort of understood what I was talking about, really got it, internalized it. And I turned to the parents and I said, doesn't it frustrate you when, you say the exact same thing to him and he doesn't listen? So the parents said, yes, why is that? And then I went through the whole explanation about how he needs to separate from you, and that's why he's more willing to listen to me than to you. Now, the next thing that makes teens difficult to parents is that they've always been influenced by their peer group, but really social media is making this much worse. As teens separate from their parents, they look to their peer group for a sense of identity and belonging. Now, this can be good and bad. It really depends on the peer group. One thing that's interesting is that the best predictor of a teen's grades in high school are the grades of their friends. Whatever the friends are doing, that's what the teen is doing as well. Okay, so you really have to look to the peer group for insight into that. And by the way, this is regardless of what they say. So in other words, you might find out that their friends are doing certain things, and the teen will deny up and down that they would ever do that, and they know that's stupid and that's ridiculous. But trust me, if their friends are doing it, that's what they're doing as well. Now, social media is making the peer influence, I think, much stronger than really in any previous generation for a couple reasons. One is they have constant contact with their peers, and this increases the peer influence. They're always texting each other. They're, always in contact. They're always in communication with one another. The amount of communication that goes on between teens at like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, is really scary. Okay, so kids will either sneak the phone or go to bed with their phone, and they're still texting each other back and forth. And another problem is that you don't know what this contact consists of. You don't know what they're saying to each other. Adults always have trouble keeping up with technology. Teens obviously are much better than we are at it. And so because of this, we really don't know what they're saying to each other, who they're talking to, as I said, even when they're talking to them. I'm kind of old, so I'll tell you the story about when I grew up. When I grew up, our home had 2 telephones. There was one in the kitchen and one in my parents' bedroom. And the one in my parents' bedroom I wasn't allowed to use. And the one in the kitchen had a cord, and the cord could stretch only so far into the dining room. So whoever I was talking to when I was on the phone, my parents knew who I was talking to. They knew what I was saying. And so because of that, I think both, one, I was much more careful about what I was saying and who I was talking to, and two, my parents knew what I was doing and knew what was going on, and knew what kinds of relationships that I had with my friends. Another problem with social media and technology is that it really takes the emotional component out of the communication. Now, this actually makes it easier for teens both to hurt each other, because they say things, without realizing how it's going to be read, or what the interpretation is going to be, and then also it causes them to then misunderstand each other, which can lead to conflicts and again to hurt feelings. The messages that teens give each other are brief and superficial. I really don't think that you can convey something in any depth, via Twitter in 140 characters. Real communication is time-consuming, it's personal, and it's deep. And really, as I said, the communication over social media, especially when it's going to be public, tends to be much more superficial, and certainly much shorter. I don't know if any of you have ever read a teen's texts, which, by the way, I do recommend you do occasionally, because it is your phone. And so if it's your phone, you certainly have a right to see what's on it. But I think actually one of the scariest things about teens' communication is how shallow it is, how banal it is, how they're really not, saying things to one another. All human beings need connection with others, and the problem is that connection through technology is not fulfilling. You don't have that same, as I was saying, depth of communication. It's void of the emotional content, so therefore it's easier to do. It's less risky to, kind of put yourself out there emotionally, but it's also not as rewarding, not as fulfilling. It really doesn't meet that need for connection. And there's research out there showing that actually the more you use technology for social connection, the more isolated you feel, and the more depressed you are. So it's kind of scary because it sort of feeds on itself. That the more isolated the teen feels and the more they reach out through technology, the more isolated they end up feeling. Another problem with social media is that all people put idealized versions of themselves on social media. We put on pictures that make us look good. We talk about the highlights of our lives, and this makes everyone else feel like their lives are inferior, and also they're missing out on all these great things that everyone else is doing. And I think this just really reinforces a natural insecurity in kids at this age. When they see everything that, everyone else is doing and they compare their own lives to, that idealized version, and, they're bound to feel lesser and more, inadequate. So I think that's another, problem with social media. By the way, if you try to talk to any of your teens about any of this, you're certainly going to get an argument that it's not true, and this is the new way, and it's actually better. But as I said, there's a lot of research behind these statements that it really isn't better. Then also, I just want to say a word about video games. And actually, the best thing I could say about video games is that they're a waste of time. The worst thing I could say about them is that they're addictive and they can lead to social isolation. You get good at whatever you practice. I think if you practice shooting at people, you're going to get good at shooting at people. If you practice learning, you're going to get good at learning. If you practice listening, communicating, empathizing with others, then you're going to get good at those skills, okay? Even if the teen has quote-unquote friends through video games, these aren't real, deep, personal, close, emotionally rewarding friendships. And again, I think the more at-risk kids, the kids that, lack the connections, that lack these social skills, they're the ones who default to video games. And again, it just makes them more alone, isolated, and gives them less opportunity to learn and to practice these skills. Another thing that I would say is that, I don't know what your values are, but I don't find killing and war to be entertainment. I've had that argument with many a teen that I just don't see, war as a form of entertainment. And I'm worried, that because of technology in general, kids have become much more entertainment-oriented. They really don't sit and reflect. They have to always be stimulated by something. They have to often be, oriented to sometimes something outside themselves. I blame the backseat video player. Once cars started having video players, where tape players, DVDs in the back seat, I think we were lost in terms of giving kids a time to just sort of like sit and to reflect on things, to have an inner dialogue, to, think about, the great questions of life. Now they all need instant gratification. They all need to, constantly be entertained, rather than really having time to reflect. Also, I have to tell you that as a psychologist and working with teens and their families, I'm really tired of dealing with the conflict that devices have brought into families. I mean, I can't tell you, it's got to be at least 50% of the issues that I deal with between teens and their families are over the teens' use of devices, where the parents attempt to set limits on it, and, the teens attempt to get around or violate those limits. This might sound radical, but I can tell you that every family that I've worked with that's eliminated devices from their homes are much happier families. They communicate more, they're calmer, there's less conflict. I know that might sound a little extreme, but it has been done to positive effect. Now, another thing that makes teens more difficult to parent these days is that teens are under more stress now in recent generations. The demands on them are greater really in all areas. The demands of school and sports are greater. We keep raising the academic bar on our kids, and I'm not sure to what end, but I know the end is not greater happiness. Our kids feel more competition for grades, more competition for, kind of like what school they're going to get into. The truth is that there's no correlation between the college you go to and your success in life. It really doesn't matter. And again, there's research behind this. So I think we're stressing kids out, making them feel like failures, if they don't get into the best colleges, when, the reality is that it really doesn't matter. My own daughter, when she was in high school, was in an IB program, an International Baccalaureate program, which really, from what I could tell, just meant she had a lot more work. And so one night she was literally crying about all the work that she had to do, for her IB program. And I said to her, sweetheart, it's okay. You don't have to do the IB program. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to do it. But because all her friends were doing it, so she had to do it. But then she's saying to me, Dad, no, you don't understand. I said, what, sweetheart? And she said, everybody in the IB program cries. Well, I think there's something wrong with that if everybody in the IB program was crying about all the work they had to do. And another problem, I think, is that when teens get involved in athletics, they lose balance in their lives. Not only, I think, are sports stress-inducing rather than stress-reducing, but it really requires a full-time commitment. I don't know when professional sports, got extended, down to the high school, level, even the middle school level. But when you have to make a full-time commitment, and practice every day and practice, even in the off season, can't go away for family vacations, because their practices and game scheduled, it's time, for kids just to hang out, just to be with their family and their friends. I think often it leaves out time for homework, because they have to go to practice. They can't miss that. So what do? They end up, skipping their homework, or, I think even worse, get less sleep, as I talked about before, and the damage that can occur. Also, I don't understand this, but when did sports practice become more important than family dinners? Why do they schedule, sports, that interfere with family time? I think that sports are great for kids. I think that it can teach very good values, of teamwork, of sportsmanship, working hard to achieve a goal. But again, I think that it's out of balance. And it's not being balanced with family time, academic time, and just time for kids to hang out, and be kids with one another. I'm also not sure why parents are allowing kids to do this. Really, the great majority of kids who play high school sports are not going to end up playing professional sports. And the parents who are hoping for athletic scholarships, I hate to tell them, but there are a lot more academic scholarships available than really there are athletic scholarships. And I think that if teens spend all the time they spend on the practice field studying, they'd probably be doing much better academically. Now, just as teens have strong emotional reactions, as I was saying before, another thing that makes them difficult to parent is that teens can trigger strong emotional reactions in their parents as well. Okay, this is the final point on why it's so difficult. All right. You love your teenagers, so you're emotionally connected to them, and so when they have strong emotional reactions, you're also going to have a strong emotional reaction to them. Now, I want to give you a little quiz, and before I'll let you know that you're going to fail this quiz. Don't worry, all parents fail this quiz. But when I tell you the answer, it's a simple quiz, just one question. But when I tell you the answer, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, of course. All right. So I want you to think about what's your most common negative emotion towards your child. When you have a bad feeling, when you have a negative emotion associated with your teenager, what do you think your most common negative emotion is? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think. You're probably thinking, frustration, annoyance, anger, okay, disappointment, okay. All right, you ready? The answer is worry. Okay, the most common negative emotion that you have towards your kids is worry. You worry about them. You worry about them all the time. When they're making bad decisions for themselves, you're worried, how are they going to succeed in life? How are they going to, grow up to be mature, responsible, individuals? How are they going to get, good jobs and support me in my old age? So we worry about our kids. We worry about the decisions they make. We worry about, who their friends are, what they're doing, if they're safe or not, because again, as I said, a lot of times we don't even know who their friends are and what they're doing and what's happening. I'll just tell you a personal story, if you don't mind, that when my daughter, one of my daughters was 17, and she got a job at the mall, and so she's first night working, mall closed at 10 o'clock. I figured it'd take her 15 minutes to get out of the store, 15 minutes to get home. She should be home around 10:30, right? It's 10:30, she's not home. It's 10:40, she's not home. 10, it's 11 o'clock, she's still not home, right? How was I feeling? I was worried, right? I was worried sick about her, okay? When she finally walked in the door about 10 minutes after 11, what did I do? I screamed at her. Where were you? Why didn't you call? What happened? All right, so even I knew I was worried, but reacted with anger, okay? So, if sometimes this worry turns to anger, that's okay. All right, just try to be aware of the worry, because as much as possible, we want to try to approach our kids with worry rather than the anger, the frustration, and disappointment. Because certainly, we experience those feelings as well. And the reason, that we worry is that, the world's a scarier place, but also the consequences of their mistakes are greater. For example, when, if you have a toddler and they run carelessly, they might fall and scrape their knee. They get a little older, they ride their bike carelessly, they might, break their arm or something like that. They get a little older, they drive carelessly, they could kill, themselves or somebody else. So that's why, I think we certainly worry more about them. And because you love them and you're reacting emotionally to them, okay, again, it's harder to parent them, because if they're responding emotionally to you, you're responding emotionally to them. That's not going to help you figure out what to do. Another thing is that by this age, they certainly know how to push your buttons, okay? They know where those buttons are. And they'll push them in order to exert their independence. That's one of the ways that they push you away. But as difficult as it can be, really try to hang in there, because your teens still need you. Okay? The next thing that I want to talk about are goals for teens' social and emotional development. Okay, these are really the skills that are important for kids to develop and become happy and successful adults. Academic skills are certainly important, but these social and emotional skills really account more for success and happiness in life than even the academic skills. It's said in life that success in life actually is 20% IQ and 80% EQ, or emotional intelligence, or these social emotional skills. So the first one is to be aware of one's own feelings and those of others. Because teens have strong emotional reactions, it's harder for them actually to be aware, of what those emotions are. It's harder for them to learn how to differentiate those feelings. The example I gave you before where, I was worried about my daughter but ended up yelling at her, well, that happens even more with teens. Teens have difficulty differentiating, I think a lot between, for example, anger, frustration, and disappointment. Anger means you're hurt. So if you're hurt, what do? You lash out. You want to hurt someone else. Frustration means you're doing something that's hard to do. What do you do when you're frustrated? You keep trying, take a break, or ask for help. Disappointment means you don't get what you want. What do you do when you're disappointed? You just kind of go, oh well, and move on, all right? So one of the things that we have to do is to help kids learn how to differentiate these feelings, to learn, what it means to be angry, what it means to be, frustrated or disappointed, and how to cope, with these feelings. Another thing is the awareness of other people's feelings. This is also crucial. It's important for kids to know how other people are feeling, because if you know how other people feel, you're more likely to get what you want. For example, a teen who's able to read the teacher's feelings is more likely to get a better grade regardless of their knowledge of the coursework. A lot of the teens that I work with have this persecution complex. They say that, everybody's fooling around and I'm the only one who got in trouble. The teacher must hate me. And what I have to explain is that everybody else could read the teacher's feelings, could see when, the teacher was getting annoyed and it was time to stop, except for you. And that's why you're right. Everyone else was fooling around, but you're the one who got caught because you're the only one who wasn't reading the teacher's feelings and read those cues to stop doing that. Okay? So again, we have to help kids learn how to read other people's feelings, how to, develop that feelings vocabulary, both for themselves, and for others. Now, along with this, we want to help teens know how to show empathy and understand others' points of view. Empathy is the capacity to share in another's feelings. Now, in order to do this, you have to be aware of, your own feelings and also the feelings of others that I noted before. It's also kind of interesting to note that the better you are at knowing your own feelings, the better you are at knowing another person's feelings. Now, this helps kids develop sensitivity towards one another, and if you're sensitive to other people's feelings, you're going to react differently to them. Maybe you're less likely to be in conflict with them. Maybe you're going to be a little more tolerant of them. Maybe you're going to be a little more, accepting of differences in them. So it really leads to, I think, much more positive social values. I have a little theory about revenge, by the way, is that if if a kid's angry, they want revenge, they want to get back at somebody, and you ask them, well, why'd you get back at them? Why'd you get revenge? What they'll say is, well, I wanted them to know what it felt like. And if you think about it, that's actually what empathy is. Empathy is when someone else shares in your feelings. So I think that we all, need to feel heard, understood, and have our feelings validated, by others. Obviously, if you try to do it through revenge, you're not going to get the kind of empathy that you're looking for. By the way, another or a way that I sell empathy to kids when I talk to teenagers and I talk to them about the importance of empathy, to understand other people's feelings. By the way, especially for them to understand their parents' feelings and to empathize with their parents. The way I sell them on how important this is because in general, if the more empathetic you are, the better you're going to be at romantic relationships, and also the more popular you're going to be. So, if you want to have friends, if you want to be popular, if you want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, work on this empathy thing. It can really be very helpful. The other part of this is understanding others' points of view. And this really teens are able to do. They're able to think more abstractly. They might be self-centered much of the time, but on an intellectual cognitive level, they actually can decenter, that they can view things from other people's perspectives. Believe it or not, even their parents, although they don't want to see it from the parents' perspective. All right, so again, we need to work with teens on this. We need to help them be aware of and practice understanding others' points of view. The next one is to regulate and cope positively with emotional behavioral impulses. This, again, is especially important in adolescence because the adolescents are more emotional, believe it or not, than either younger or at older ages. Now, this refers to self-control. One aspect of self-control is the ability to moderate your emotional reaction to that situation, whether that reaction is positive or negative. Do you get angry and lose control quickly? You become excited and overstimulated? So really, teens have to be taught how to regulate their emotions. Unfortunately, it feels good to kind of like let it all out. As I said in the beginning, I think, that's what my practice is based on, is that, teens are emotional and they just respond emotionally to situations. They do what they feel like doing. By the way, one of the things that I think is kind of interesting is that what's the opposite expression? I have the expression, do what you feel like doing. We don't even have an expression for do what you think like doing, control your emotional reaction, and then respond. So this is how natural it is, I think, for people just to respond emotionally, to just sort of do what you feel like doing. But if you don't regulate and cope with those emotions, you're less likely to get what you want. We all have what I call the yelling reflex. It's like if somebody yells at you, what do you feel like doing? You feel like yelling back. Well, if they yell at you, you yell back at them, what's going to happen? They're going to yell louder. That's not going to work, okay? I have this expression, and that's that when I'm mad at my wife, I buy her flowers. And when I say that to people are always perplexed. If you're mad at her, why would you buy her flowers? Well, if I'm mad at her, what do I want? I want her to be nice to me, right? I'm probably mad at her because she's not certainly treating me the way I deserve to be treated. All right. Now, if I do what I feel like doing, which is either yelling at her or not talking to her, I doubt it's really going to motivate her to be nice to me. Well, if I'm mad at her, and I reach out and I buy her flowers, I have a much better chance that she's going to be nice to me. Now, if I'm really mad at my wife, if it's really bad, I'm really, really upset with her, then I'll clean the kitchen. That usually works. Now, another component of this, of controlling, or dealing with feelings and behavioral impulses, is delay of gratification. This is something, I think that society is working against teenagers, because everything's instantaneous. Everything's at their fingertips. Teens don't really need to wait for things. I think the way kids used to in previous generations. But if you don't know how to wait for things, if you don't know how to delay gratification, you can have less of what you want. Education really is all about delaying gratification. The more education you have, the more successful you're going to be, the more money you're going to make, the more you're going to be able to do what you want to do later in life. Okay, but it's first you got to do the education, and then you get what you want. Money is another example of this. I think it's good that schools are starting to really teach financial literacy. So like the example, all right, let's say you want to buy something and it costs $100, and if you don't have the money, you put it on your credit card, how much does it cost? Well, depending on the interest rate, it could cost you $120 at the end of the year. Let's say you wait, till you have the $100 and then you buy it, well, then it costs $100. Now, let's say you wait till you have the $100, but you invest the $100 instead of spending it, depending on how you've invested it or, the rate of return, you can end up with more money, so then you can have the $100, buy what you want, and you have the interest from it. Also, as one teenager pointed out to me, that, a year later, whatever you wanted is probably going to cost a lot less too. So again, we need to help kids learn how to control those behavioral impulses and to really sort of stop and think before they do things. The next is to be positive goal and plan oriented. Now, we have goals no matter what we're doing. We just need to be aware of them. And it's very important for kids to be aware, of what it is that they want. What is it that you want? What are you trying to do? Another reason that goals are important is because it gives a sense of hope and optimism. It can give you a vision of what it is that you want and can achieve. So it can be very motivating for kids. One, because it gives them a vision of what they want, but it also gives them that sense of hope that they can achieve it. Kids who are depressed or have very low self-esteem, often don't set goals for themselves. They're kind of like, well, why should I study? I'm going to get a bad grade anyway. So the child doesn't expect to achieve. Obviously, they're not going to try. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we need to talk to teens about goals. We need to ask them what they want. What is it that you want, both short-term and long-term? Because one of the problems is that, those goals can conflict. So the teen might have a goal to be with their friends, but their goal might also be to, attain a certain grade or, kind of go to a certain college. And so, if they go to the party, this weekend and don't study, that can interfere with their long-term goal. So that this does get kind of complicated. But if you start out helping kids just be aware of those goals, again, it's going to give their lives more direction and more motivation. One of the things that I often do when I'm working with teenagers is that I'll ask them, what's their goal for after high school? What is it that they want? What do they want to do after high school? Most kids, look at me with that, like a blank expression and like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, do you want to go to college? So they say yes. I say, okay. Well, you realize that, the better your grades are, the more choice you're going to have. I give them the whole explanation that it doesn't matter what college you go to, but I explain that it does give you more choices. It gives you more control. It gives you more freedom, to go where you want to go. All right? But the other, or if they want to go to a vocational school or if they want to get a job, that's fine as well. But the kids who have a goal then for after high school have a reason to do the work in high school. If a kid doesn't know what he wants to do after school, after he's finished with high school, like, why should he study? Why should he learn? Why should he bother? Okay, because high school is a means to an end. All right, so if you don't know what you want after school, after high school, it's hard to be motivated, to kind of get through the means to achieve it. All right, and then we also want to use positive social skills in handling relationships. So in addition to, awareness of feelings, empathy, self-control, goal orientation, it's necessary for kids to know how to deal effectively with others. This entails social skills like communication, problem solving. And unfortunately, we have to keep working with teenagers on this. We have to, still get them to make eye contact, communicate effectively. And again, this is one of the detriments, I think, of technology is they don't, look up from their phone long enough to, make eye contact, with other people. And again, they don't know how to have conversations, face to face. I'm sure a lot of you have seen, teenagers who are out to dinner together, and they're all, sitting with their face in their phone rather than talking to the person next to them. But it's very important that we help kids do this. This again gets back to my complaint about practice during dinner time. A lot of social skills are taught around the dinner table, and so I think it's very important for families to practice these skills and to have kids sit at the dinner table, interacting with them, engaging in conversation with them. The next thing that I want to talk about is what teens are usually trying to express to us. because I said teens, they're a different animal. They certainly can be difficult to, to understand. So if you understand, kind of like where they're coming from, this might help you, deal with them, interact with them a little more effectively. The first is that teens need to save face. Okay, they're very prone to embarrassment. They're very sensitive at this age when, because there's strong emotional reactions, also because their sense of self isn't, firmly established, so they can feel very insecure at times, so that's normal at this age. The thing that's interesting is that they can be sensitive both to praise and to criticism. So, both can cause embarrassment, especially in public, so that when you praise your teenager, in front of or to someone else, or brag about them, this can be a source of embarrassment to them. When certainly when you're criticizing them, they're very hypersensitive to that, and also, can have difficulty hearing the criticism. They can be overly sensitive to it. Okay. So you do want to be sensitive to this issue. You do want to, make them aware of how easy it is, to kind of like embarrass them. I have to admit, though, that I took I guess, a perverse pleasure in embarrassing my teenagers when they were younger. Like one thing I used to do that when we'd go to a restaurant, and especially if there's like an attractive waiter serving us, when the waiter comes over and says, hi, my name is Josh, I'll be serving you tonight. I would then proceed to introduce myself and my children and say, oh, hi, my name is Stephen, this is my daughter, and okay, and as my kids, would slink under the table. All right, so it's probably don't do that, okay? I'm not doing good modeling here. But hopefully my kids love me nonetheless. Because I would say, though, that, just like teens are very easily to embarrass, I also take it for granted that they feel embarrassed about you. Okay, that they're probably always rolling their eyes when you're around, and especially when their friends are around. But so as I said, just kind of be sensitive to this issue and maybe don't do what I did. And the next thing that we want that teens do is they just want to be listened to. Okay, they just want you to be a sounding board. All right, they just need to vent. They just need to talk. They're not asking for your advice. They're not asking for, kind of like feedback or anything. You'll know teens are doing this when they're just kind of like hanging around and sometimes even not talking. Sometimes, they're just sort of like there, all right? And you have to be available to them, okay? Unfortunately, parenting in general is time consuming and not time efficient. So you need to look for times to be with your teen so they can talk to you, so they can, just kind of vent, just kind of like say what's on their mind, just as I said, kind of like use you, as a sounding board. They're not, asking for advice, as I said, they just want to be listened to. Okay, your role here in this is to just make noises like, oh, uh-huh, oh, okay, uh-huh, all right. Those are the appropriate parental responses to do at this time. One of the problems here, by the way, is that often at night is when teens want to talk to you. When you're exhausted and all you want to do is go to bed, but their biological clock is telling them to stay up. So they're ready to talk. You're ready to go to bed. Well, that's one of the times that I think you really need to, kind of try to hang in there. And keep your eyes open, just nod your head a lot, and just listen. Then unfortunately, a lot of times, teens are also looking for an argument. And they're doing this, to kind of like push you away. This is how they, exert their independence from you. They challenge your authority, they make negative statements. All right, and so when kids are argumentative like this, don't look for deep reasons for it, okay? Yeah, they might be in a bad mood, something else might have happened, yeah, they're taking it out on you, but really there's not a lot you're going to do, okay? But certainly don't personalize it, okay? Don't see this as, you have a horrible relationship with them and they have no you, and everything that you've done for them, for the past 16 years, don't really count. No, that's not true. All right, they just, as I say, they need to exert their independence. They need to push you away. And so they're just going to pick a fight with you. You're going to lose by arguing, okay? This is sometimes, you just got to, kind of like say, look, I see you're really upset right now. Maybe we'll talk about this later, all right? Try not to engage with them, okay? Because the more you engage with them, just the angrier they're going to get, and you're never going to win the argument. Now, fortunately, sometimes teens will come to you for emotional support. Okay, this is the empathy. It's not just being listened to, but it's really being listened to and empathized with. Having their feelings validated. This can be, when they're really going through a rough time, when they are very emotional, when they're facing a new challenge, or they're having difficulty either with school or with a friend. Okay. Now you want to, when they are looking for your support, you do want to ask questions, okay? You do want to sort of draw them out a little more. It's important not to just jump to, recommendations to, well, I think you should do this or that. This is kind of like listening plus empathy, plus the emotional support that you're going to give them. Okay. Now, least often, but most important, is when teens are actually asking for your help. They actually need your guidance, need your advice. We certainly wish that this would happen more often, all right? And because we have, valuable advice to give them. We have life experience, to give them. We do have a fully functioning prefrontal cortex that can anticipate consequences, that can, make rational, decisions and utilize good judgment. But this probably happens least than the others. But when you are, helping your team, when you are helping them come up with solutions to problems, don't jump in with a solution right away. Really help them brainstorm, really sort of like go through, various options. When you're throwing out ideas, that's all you're doing, is you're throwing out ideas. You're not saying, okay, this is really what you should do. This is how you should handle it. It's more like, well, gee, have you thought about this? Or, well, you might consider doing that. They're really just suggestions, that you're helping your kid be aware of, and through that, then they can, decide what they're going to do. And I really think that that's how you can be most helpful to them. Okay, the next thing is to really some things to keep in mind when you're parenting teens. One is to encourage recognition of their personal strengths and weaknesses. They really need to know their strengths in order to use them, to know what they're good at, to know, what their areas of competence are. But they also need to be aware of their weaknesses, things that are difficult for them, things that, maybe they do need to work on. Now, as I was saying before, this can be difficult to point out to them, as they're sensitive, both to compliments and criticism, but you need to find a way to do this anyway. You want to find times to praise specific behavior, in a natural way, okay? So you might say something like, gee, I noticed you were studying a lot last night, okay? You want to, as I said, point to a specific behavior that they were doing. Now, one, they can't argue. They can't say, no, I wasn't studying, so they can't reject it. Also, they are going to, believe it or not, like the positive attention that they're getting from you, and also it makes them aware of something that they're doing, a strength that they have, something that they're certainly capable of. You want to avoid global praise, like, oh, you're so smart, you're so pretty, you're so, talented. Interestingly, when you praise a kid for being smart, you'll actually undermine their ability to take challenges, to take risks. This is because what I said before about teens don't want to disappoint you, and so if you've told them how smart they are, they don't want to, they don't want to prove you wrong, and so as I said, that's why they're then less likely to accept new challenges. They just want to like rest on their laurels. Okay. So again, try to be specific, in the praise, and also, you do need to point out to them some of the things that are more difficult to them, or some of the things that they need to work on. But again, try to do this in a gentle and a loving way, rather than a critical or certainly an angry way, because then they're going to respond to the emotion behind the criticism, really, rather than the message of it. Next thing we want to do is to help them make realistic goals and plans. As I was talking before about the importance of helping them be aware of, kind of like what they want, and help them learn to do this. Again, this is a prefrontal cortex skill that they have trouble with, but is very important. So talk to them about their plans for the weekend. I know teens are notorious for not making plans. It's what are you doing this weekend? I don't know, all right? They always do things like last minute. But help them think about, well, what is it that you want to do this weekend? What are some of your goals for the weekend? Do you have any work you need to do? Are there things you need to study for? Talk to them about things that you've planned, all right, so that they'll be aware of that, and then they can work around that. When you're helping them develop plans, a plan is basically who, what, when, where, and how. And again, we need to help kids break it down. They don't normally do this, So if the teen's goal is to, improve their grade, okay, say, okay, well, what's your plan? And they'll say, well, I'll just get a better grade. Well, how are you going to do that? Okay. And they'll usually shrug, okay? So you say, okay, well, let's talk about this, all right? So who was involved in this? If you want to get a better grade, who do you need to talk to? Do you need my help? Do you need a tutor? Do you want to talk to the teacher about it? What do you need to do to get a better grade? Do you need to study more? Do you, just need to go over the material? Do you need to drop down to an easier class? When are you going to find the time to do this? When are you going to study? Really pin them down, have them schedule study time, even the where, they're going to study, in their room, in the library, okay? And also how. Every kid has their own learning style. Are they just going to go over their notes over and over? Do they want somebody to test them? Help them really learn, how to break this down and know how to study. The next thing that we want to do is support them in coping with frustration and disappointment. This is what I was talking about before in terms of helping them be aware of these different feelings. Label these feelings for them, empathize with them when they're having these feelings. Talk about your own frustration and disappointment. Just not, by the way, your frustration and disappointment with them. Okay, just talk about, your day and at work and, the things that you had to deal with. So again, this will help normalize it for them, and by modeling how you've dealt with it will help them learn how to deal with it as well. Next, we want to encourage involvement in extracurricular activities that build social skills and develop interests. I'm concerned that this generation of kids it's too entertainment oriented. All they know, is entertainment. And if I ask a kid again, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are your long-term goals? If they say I want to be a sports broadcaster, a video game developer, or a YouTuber, I think I'm going to scream, okay? Because that's all kids know. And it's interesting because if you do something as a kid for fun that relates to your job as an adult, you're really going to like your job, right? I can admit to being somewhat of a weird teen that when I was a teenager, one of my favorite things to do was to read biographies. I don't know why, I just like hearing people's stories. And maybe that's why I really like my job as a psychologist, because that's what I do. I hear people's stories all day long. Okay, so we have to help kids develop these interests and to be involved in a variety of activities, because I really worry, that when they grow up and they realize that, there aren't that many jobs in sports broadcasting or video game design, or being a YouTuber, they're going to have very unfulfilling careers. So let's help them develop, a variety of interests and activities. Another very important thing is to have teens give to others through chores at home and community service. Because teens live such busy lives, and parents do too, I don't think that they're doing this as much. Now, schools are certainly recognizing the importance of community service. but it is very important to teach kids to give back. By the way, this is one of the things that also helps them develop a sense of empathy when they give back. And I believe that they should give back both at home and to the community, as well. The chores at home will also teach them a sense of responsibility, which is going to help them, be more independent in the future. Now, finally, let me go over some parenting strategies, which I could probably spend another hour talking about this, and I realize I'm over time, but I'll go through this, I apologize, briefly. The first thing to understand is that the more you talk, the less they listen. All right, there's an inverse relationship between the amount of talking you do and the amount of listening that they do. The more they talk, the more they're going to listen. So again, as I said, parenting, especially a teenager, is not time efficient. You got to be around them so that they have time to talk to you. And again, this often is at inconvenient times for you, especially late at night. Okay, car rides, by the way, also are often a good time to talk to the teen. You just have to yell at them to, get the earbuds out of their ears. Next, you have to understand that it's about them. So you always want to appeal to enlightened self-interest. How is this good for you? Okay, how are you going to benefit from this? When I talk to kids about grades, it's like, I don't care what grades they get, and whatever grades they get, it's not going to help their parents. It's not going to benefit their parents' lives in any way, but it might benefit theirs. So it's not about your parents and your teachers. It's about you. What is it that you want? What's going to get you what you want? Again, we have to help them be aware of their goals. What is it that they want? Okay, but then also, whatever you're talking to them about, frame it for them, in terms of how it's in their best interest, because they're egocentric anyway, and this is where they're going to come from. Okay. In terms of discipline, you want to use what's called natural and logical consequences rather than punishment. This is the first you work, then you play. You eat your vegetables, you get dessert. Okay. If you use your devices appropriately, if you follow the rules, you can keep using them. If you don't use them appropriately, you're not going to be able to use them. All right. I was talking to a kid just last night about he was responsible for losing his cell phone, and he's like, what are you talking about? I didn't take it away. My parents took it away. I said, no, you took it away. I said, you knew the rules. You knew, what would happen. Your parents went over this 100 times, and you were the one, who chose, to ignore the rule. Okay, and that's why it got taken away. Your parents had no choice. This is the way the world works. If you can use things appropriately, you can keep using it. And if you can't, you're not going to have it. Okay, so again, it's not, you against them. It's that you're just pointing out the natural or logical consequences of their actions. Okay, my wife always does this to me, by the way, because whenever I leave things out, she puts them away where they belong, and that's why I can never find them again. Next, you want to make sure that you're modeling what you want to see in them. Self-control, respect, listening, etc. Okay? That, if you want them to use good self-control, well, it's always good to model, self-control. This occurred to me one day when actually my daughter was little, and I was yelling at her to stop yelling, and something about that didn't sound right. All right, so we really need to be aware of our own feelings, keep our own feelings in check, but we also want to make sure that we're speaking to them in a respectful manner. Okay, even when they're not being respectful to us. Okay, you're listening to them. As I said before, the more we listen to them, then the more they're likely to listen to us. Next, you want to make sure that you, as I keep saying, find time to hang out with them. Also, part of this is to have fun with them. It's very difficult to have a relationship with somebody if you're not having fun with them. If all your interactions with your teenager, are about managerial things, or, trying to resolve conflicts, or, give them direction and guidance, they're not going to listen to you. If you go out with them, if you have fun with them, be silly with them, do enjoyable things with them, that's going to make them feel loved, and that's what's really going to support your relationship with them. And then finally, patience, patience, patience. There's no question teenagers require a lot of patience on your part. They're challenging, they're going through a difficult stage in life. The risks are great. But as I said, if you hang in there, if you listen to them, if you provide the emotional support for them, if you guide them when they're open to it, if you set appropriate limits on them through natural and logical consequences, I think you'll all get through this. And if I have time, I'm happy to take some questions.
All right. Sorry, I needed to unmute myself there. Great presentation, Doctor. Thank you very much. I'm going to go right into some questions. So, how can you help teens to increase their self-esteem? No matter what parents say about their looks or their intelligence abilities and so forth, they think that you're saying them because, they're your kid, and that they don't possess those qualities. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and that's a very important issue, because the teen self-esteem is really going to help them in a variety of areas. Kids with good self-esteem are going to do better in school. They're less likely to, abuse drugs. They're less likely to, engage in, other kinds of risky behavior. So certainly self-esteem is a very important issue. One thing to do, as I was saying before, is to be specific in your praise. Point out specific things. If you say, oh, you're so wonderful, well, what was wonderful about them? What did they do, that was wonderful? Okay, so point out specific strengths that they have and that can make them aware of areas of competence, of things that, they are good at.
So it's not just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. All right, well, I was going to say the other thing is that they also do need to experience success. And with some kids, especially kids, with challenges, you need to create what's been called an island of competence. There has to be something, that they're good at, something that they can excel at. And this is why those extracurricular activities can be so important, because not every kid is going to be good at school, and not every kid is going to be good at sports. But there are a lot of things out there in the world that kids can be good at. So I don't care, if it's cooking or gardening or, woodworking or, drawing or, being a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout or, they're, into science, okay? Or building things. It's important to support their areas of competence, and as I said, the feedback that you give them be very specific and tied to their behavior.
So that feedback shouldn't just be some blanket thing about, oh, you're the best kid in the whole world, and really focus on something that they can really get and
Right.
understand, and it's real.
And it's real, and that they've done, as I said, then they can't reject it. So like, so if you said, boy, that's that you really worked really hard on, on that picture, and you've really given it a lot of, thought and effort, okay, they can't reject that. You say, oh, that's so beautiful, you're such a wonderful artist, that they can reject.
Okay. So, and this has to do with schools, not just parents. So do you think schools should reward students for academic achievement, or should I'm assuming the they is the student in this case, so should they be expected to love to learn without incentives, other than the fact that their success is incentive? So could you talk a little bit about, academic achievement and rewards and so forth?
Okay, there are three levels of motivation. There's intrinsic, social, and material reinforcement, and it really depends on the kid. Look, we would all love our kids to be intrinsically motivated. We would all want them to just sort of like, learn for the, love of learning. Learn because, it feels good to work hard and to apply yourself and, and to achieve. And for some kids, that's true. They are very intrinsically motivated, to do their work, and to get good grades. They derive a great sense of self-satisfaction from that. Okay, so for those kids, no, you don't need to do anything else. Teens at this age, teens are very socially oriented. All right, as I said, the best predictor of grades are the grades of your friends. You don't want to be embarrassed by your friends. Okay, so in other words, by the way, if your friends get good grades and you get a bad grade, you're going to be embarrassed, and it works the other way too. If your friends get bad grades and you get a good grade, you're also going to be embarrassed. So. But social recognition, can also be very important. So like having, awards, having kids in an honor society, having a, like a dean's list, and that can be motivating for kids who are more socially oriented. So I would take advantage of that as well. Now, unfortunately, there are some kids who, lack the intrinsic motivation and also lack the social motivation. A lot of these kids are, depressed or have experienced a lot of failure. And so for those kids, you have to give the extrinsic motivators, okay? But if you're giving an extrinsic motivator, whether, it's a material or a privilege, something like that, we always want to pair it with the social reinforcement looking to develop the intrinsic motivation. But bottom line, it also can come down to, as I said before, enlightened self-interest. So often I say to kids, who lack the intrinsic motivation, I say, do you like money? And, haven't, the kid who said no. So I said, well, gee, can I tell you something interesting? That there's no correlation between the college you go to and your success in life, but there is a correlation between the grades you get in high school and the amount of money you make in real life. All right? And why would that be? And I said it has to do with work ethic. Okay, if you have a good work ethic, you're going to get good grades. And if you have a good work ethic, I don't care if you're a CEO of a company, or a landscaper. All right, if you have a good work ethic, you're going to make more money. All right, so that's when you can also appeal to the extrinsic motivation. But there, unfortunately, it also involves a delay of gratification. That the material reward, doesn't come until later, well after high school.
Well, that's part of life too.
And something they got to learn. Yep.
I know we went a little long, but the audience is really staying on, so I'm going to do at least one more question, at least it may be another one after that. We'll see how much time we have left.
I'm here all night.
So, pardon me?
I said I'm here all night.
Okay, well, maybe you are, but we're not.
Okay.
What suggestions do you have to help young adults deal with disappointment and developing the coping skills to deal with disappointment? It seems that emotions are so magnified and then reactions are so extreme, there doesn't seem to be a middle ground there in coping with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I think I may have mentioned, is that anger is a default negative emotion. If you get a bad feeling, you don't know what it is, you're going to act like you're angry. And so that's why we have to help kids learn to differentiate their feelings. We have to help them understand what disappointment means. Disappointment means you don't get what you want. We also have to normalize it for them. I often, not so much with teens because they understand this a little better, but with younger kids, I'll ask them, do your parents ever get disappointed? And they'll say, no, of course not. They control everything. They get everything that they want. Okay. And the parents obviously are also laughing, that they, when the kid thinks they never get disappointed. But as I said, we've got to normalize it. If you sit around the dinner table and you talk politics, your kids are going to learn politics. If you sit around the dinner table and you talk feelings, your kid's going to learn feelings. So as I said, you want to, talk about disappointment. You want to model disappointment. Point out, when you felt disappointed and how you dealt with it. So as I said, really the trick is to get kids to label it appropriately. Normalize it for them that everybody gets disappointed. The other thing that you want to do that I didn't have time to get into is to really teach them how to problem solve. Because if you didn't get what you wanted, it doesn't mean, you're not going to get anything. okay? And so then what you have to do is to figure out, okay, I'm disappointed, I didn't get what I want, how can I get what I want, all right? So it doesn't mean, kind of like you just sort of like give up, and feel hopeless. It's just that, disappointment's part of life. You got to kind of move on and keep going and keep trying.
All right, one more question. You talk a lot about, kids wanting to separate themselves and exert their independence and so forth. So do kids have a conscious recognition of doing that, or does it just kind of happen and they're as confused about it as you might be? Or is this something they really consciously recognize they're doing?
With most kids, I would say it's subconscious. It's a reflex. They're just doing it. They're not. They don't realize that they're doing it in the moment. And by the way, it is helpful though to talk about it and to explain it. Now, as I was saying before, when I have somebody in therapy, it's a lot easier for me to sort of explain this to them. They're gonna understand it, or I should be willing to hear it a lot better from me than they will from their parent. So if the parent is saying, look, I know you need to be independent and have a separate sense of self, and that's why you're being really obnoxious to me right now. Probably is not going to go over very well. But if I explain to the kid or somebody else outside the family, explains that, look, I understand you need to be independent. I understand that, you need to have your own separate sense of self. And so sometimes that does make you, kind of like push your parents away. But I just want to reassure you, your parents do want you to be independent. They do want you to, kind of like have your freedom. So let's talk about, kind of like other ways that you can go about, getting that, that freedom and that independent sense of self that you want, rather than just, arguing or being oppositional with your parents, because you can see usually your parents don't respond very well to that, and they can, tighten the limits rather than give you more freedom.
Well, I think we've got to wrap it up here.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of really great information. I'm going to turn this back to Kelly for a wrap-up.
Thank you all for joining us on our webinar, Raising Emotionally Intelligent Teens. There is an exit survey which we need everyone attending to fill out. The webinar blog is open now and available for the next 7 days on the NJCTS website for any additional questions that were not covered in tonight's presentation. That website is www.njcts.org. Also, an archived recording of tonight's webinar will be posted to our website. Our next presentation, Assistive Technologies for Students, will be presented by Dr. Brian Friedlander and is scheduled for January 20th, 2016. This ends tonight's webinar. Thank you, Dr. Tobias, for your presentation, and thank you, everyone, for attending. Good night.